Davidoff has been a symbol of elegance and luxury since its cigars were first introduced in 1967. Although still often associated with its Cuban heritage, they have been produced in the Dominican Republic since 1990. When enjoying a fine cigar, have you ever stopped to wonder how it made its journey from mere seeds in the ground to between your fingers? Have you ever admired the cigar's leaf and marveled at its texture, or taken a moment to appreciate the subtlety of its aromas? Join us as we explore how Davidoff makes their premium cigars. We guarantee you that it will be time beautifully filled. In late 2018, Bespoke unit founder Paul Anthony was invited to the Dominican Republic by Klaas Kelner, son of Hendrik Kelner. Tabadom's owner and founder, Hendrik or Henki Kelner, has been the driving force of Davidoff cigar production since it moved from Cuba in 1990. We arrived in early 2019 with Paul flying in from Philadelphia and me from Paris, France. We spent the first night in Santo Domingo on the island's south coast. We walked on the New World's oldest paved streets and admired its buildings that predate the USA's Fairbanks House by over a century. We left Santo Domingo the next day and made our way north. We passed street markets, rice fields, mountain landscapes, until we arrived at Santiago de los Caballeros. There we would meet Klaas and his father for dinner, before visiting Davidoff's facilities near Villa Gonzales the next day.
My name is Hendrik Kelner. Normal people name me Henki, but I think the more frequent name for me, especially in the factory, is engineer. I born in Dominican Republic. My father come from Holland. My mother Dominican. I'm student industrial engineer in Mexico, Monterrey. But my real passion was the tobacco.
Yeah.
I born in tobacco. My family is tobacco. I create a small factory, very small. I don't have money for more, only with 6 rollers. My idea was to create a factory to produce the best cigars. And I decided not to make my brand, only private label. And all my dedication, all my time was to create a vertical integrated company. And my passion was the product. And in a few years, in 5 years, we produced 2.7 million cigars. In 1988, I have the firm contact with Dr. Snyder. Dr. Snyder, the owner of Davidoff, decided to leave from Cuba. I think the most important reason that they select my factory was the Davidoff Oettinger at that time is a company distribution cigar. It's not involved in production. And my company, Tabadom, is only production, no distribution. And that was a perfect marriage. And we make a blend, send some sample in 1989. They like the cigars, and they invite me for a breakfast in New York. I suppose that we continue this discussion, but for my surprise, I received my first order, 125,000 cigars, only for USA. And 3 months later, I received an order for 3 million. The effort I need to make a company that produced 2.7 million to increase 3 million more, double of the production.
As enormous as that figure may sound, Davidoff produces today nearly 10 times that amount in a single year. So how is this feat accomplished?
My name is Hamlet Espinal. I'm the general manager, as you mentioned, and the head of the global production of Oettinger Davidoff AG.
Sure. And how long have you been with Davidoff?
Well, it has been a long journey. I have more than 20 years in the company. I start from the scratch, let's say, And now, as you mentioned before, I'm the general manager. For this year, in Dominican Republic, we are planning to produce more than 25 million cigars, handmade cigars, because also we produce some machine-made cigars.
Sure.
But I'm referring also only to the
premium.
To the premium ones, yes. And then the average production is around, let's say per day, is around 108,000 per day. And then Central America, we are planning to produce close to 14 millions.
Sure.
Yeah.
And is that at the Camacho factory?
Yes, I'm talking about the Camacho factory.
Yeah. That's in Honduras, correct?
Correct, in Honduras.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. Based on production globally, we have 2,100 employees. Like I said before, including the operations that we have in Central America and Dominican Republic, of course. And specifically in Dominican Republic, we have 1,400 employees. And then in Central America, like 600.
I suppose that our story should begin in one of Davidoff's 52 greenhouses. An area shrouded in mystique, Klaas nevertheless provided us with privileged access so that we could understand how the journey of their 9 million plants is set into motion every year.
The tobacco flower originally, or normally, is a hermaphrodite, meaning it has both the male and the female sex. If you look at this one in particular, you can see it has 5 stamen that have pollen, right? Mm-hmm. The 5 sticks that stick out, and inside you can see that there is a green little dot. That's the stigma. That's the female. The pollen hits the stigma, right? It rubs off on the stigma, and then the juices bring it down to the oval. And this oval is where basically the capsule that will create in the end the seeds.
Okay.
So normally a tobacco plant can reproduce on its own.
Sure.
Right.
And like how many seeds would be in each one of these pods?
One of these is about 1,000, some people say up to 1,500 seeds. You can see the 5 stamen and the stigma, right? You can hold on to that, right? And then this one is a hybrid that we've created. And this one, the stamen, the male part, you can see that it doesn't produce pollen. Right? You can see the difference. It's quite interesting. So all of our tobacco in Davidoff does not have the ability to produce pollen, meaning that when we put it out on the farm, there is no tobacco that's going to be creating seeds. And that way, we're protecting the genetic capacity of that seed, and we're also protecting ourselves, making sure that nobody's going to steal that tobacco. A little genetics course, right? Mendel theory. It's very simple. You got the F1 generation, right? You got the father, you got the mother, and the best example I like to use, I think, is very simple. Catholic religion, right? My Catholic background. You have Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve are pure Adam, pure Eve. They didn't have ancestors before them, because I'm a mix of my dad and my mother, so you can't consider me pure, right? So Adam and Eve is pure Adam, pure Eve. They have a son, F2 generation, right? And that son is going to be 50% Adam, 50% Eve. And it's going to have 50% of the qualities of Adam, 50% of the qualities of Eve. Now, let's say I want to make the next son, or I like the qualities of Eve. Then I can take that son and match it with Eve again. And then the next one is going to have 75% Eve, 25% Adam. Simple math. Sure. Then you do it again, you do it again, you do it again. You get 83% Eve, 92% Eve, 90-something% Eve, until about 8 crossings, you got 99.9999% Eve.
Sure.
So it takes about 8 crossings to create a hybrid that we want, maintaining that one characteristic that we wanted from Adam that passes on no matter what, which is sterility.
That traditional of our country, they create the plant in the soil. Many plants die, and you need to replant maybe 10%. You have 10% plant in different age. Of course, when they harvest a leaf with 10 days less, 10 days less. And I decided to create greenhouse. And now, less than 1% of the plant that. The crop is uniform. You can see that. It's uniform. When I have the idea, I made the first 5 greenhouse. My people say, no, the farm is too traditional. I don't like that. They say, no, let me try. I say, you have 2 hectares, please plant 0.2 hectares of this plant. The effect was too impressed. The next year, I need to create 52 greenhouses.
Just so you give you an example of how many seeds come out of here, right? Right here.
Oh, wow.
I mean, that's not even all of them. We don't even use all of the seeds. We pass all the seeds through a filter and we weigh them, and only the top 30% of all the seeds actually got used. The way we do this is we have seeds, right? We have sterile ash. It's a little wet, but you have seeds, you have our hybrid. We take more or less a capsule size of seeds, right? Which is 0.3 grams in this case. Right? It's a little less. And we put it here on the ash. Then what I do is I mix it in here with the sterile ash. And the point is, it's actually very simple. You like simple things, right? Yeah. So that when we spread it here, when we sow it here, we actually know where we're sowing.
Sure.
That's the only reason for the ash.
Yeah.
So we know exactly where we're sowing. We take our highly advanced tools.
Yeah, this looks pretty sophisticated.
Yeah, very, very sophisticated. You know, we are in a lab right now. And we put it in here. And no, we normally do this in an environment that is non-windy, early in the mornings normally. And I try my best to spread it all over. At this point, we have more or less the seeds sown, right? And then I actually throw sterile dry rice husk.
Ah, okay.
And basically, as you boil them, and basically at this moment, I pour it over. And what this does is it maintains the humidity inside the soil, and then it also protects from irrigation so the seeds don't get moved around and shifted. In 10 days, you got this. And then this is 21 days.
Okay, so you're getting some pretty quick growth.
Yeah. The ladies here, their job is to transplant each one of these leaves, each one of these plants, the strongest ones, and more or less all of them around the same size, and then transplant them over to there. So they have gloves, and they dip their gloves in this raw milk, just normal raw milk, and the milk with the gloves actually protects the roots from any trauma.
Okay.
And that way they're not touching the roots or the leaves with anything that is not pure. So she tries to take more or less the plants that are more or less the same size. That way when you transplant them over to the tray, they more or less all grow at the same time. This lady's job is to make sure that when she's putting them in each one of these slots, none of the leaves are covered. Because if one of the leaves are covered, then that can lead to rotting. There's only one main root system. And what we want is that in these individual slots, the root system develops and you have secondary roots. And that way they can anchor down at the moment that you're transplanting them. This is about 4 to 5 days before the transplantation to the farm. Right?
Okay.
And what we have here, you see that obviously these leaves are the first leaves to come out. These are non-commercial leaves. These will not make it into cigars, and you see that they're trimmed.
Sure.
So we actually trim the leaves so that the nutrients don't go to the leaves and they go to the roots.
Mm-hmm.
Because we want the roots to develop. Again, we're not in the business of leaves at this moment. We're in the business of strong, healthy roots. You can see here how the root system has developed.
Oh yeah, it's quite complex.
It is quite complex. It's not just one main root, but it's several side roots. You know, and that way when we transplant it, you have healthy roots that can anchor down and not be washed away by a rain or irrigation. Mm-hmm. And this is probably the most important part. Of course, in these 52 greenhouses, you can't smoke cigars. You can't walk in without like putting your shoes in water. cars can't come in here. It's very well protected so that there's as least possibility of infection.
Obviously, these won't be commercial leaves, but okay. Once they're in the ground on the actual farm, and then the commercial leaves start to grow.
Yeah, basically, after you have transplanted them, you're gonna start seeing the first commercial leaves come up in the next couple of weeks.
Okay.
You know, and that would be the volado. So the plants grow basically from the bottom up, and the first leaves to come up are the volado, seco, then visus, then ligero. That's why you also harvest them accordingly.
Oh, because they've matured by the time you
because the
harvest.
plant is growing from the top. You see how the flower comes up from the top? The plant is always growing at the top.
Sure.
And that's where the new leaves are coming out and the flowers coming out. So that's how it kind of happens. You're gonna start seeing a plant half my size at day 30 after transplantation.
Yeah, wow.
And again, it grows to a plant of 2 kilos in 100 days.
Needless to say, such extraordinary growth requires rigorous and meticulous supervision. Klaas explained that the planting season during winter is amongst the busiest for the farmers. We headed to his family farm at dawn, hoping to catch the sunrise over the San Vicente tobacco fields. Unfortunately, it was overcast that day. Nevertheless, it didn't detract from the awe-inspiring scenery.
Davidoff controls 15 different zones in Dominican Republic, and each zone is a different type of soil that they have identified. And then they grab farmers from different zones and they have a contract with that farmer. So as a contracted farmer, Davidoff basically invests in you and finances you the whole operation.
Sure.
They finance you the fertilizers, any other product that you're going to be using, the technical advice. They give you the 45-day-old plant to transplant. And then they also even finance the curing barns.
Okay.
So you basically end up having everything financed for you, and then from your earnings you basically pay them back.
Yeah.
And it's a win-win situation because they get the tobacco that they want at the quality that they want, and then you have a partnership with a great company that finances everything you and makes sure that you win money. So basically the plant in most general cases gets divided into 4 different primings. Like I was explaining with harvesting, every 2 leaves every 3 days. So if you have a plant of 16 leaves, which in Dominican Republic makes you a happy farmer, right? It puts money into your pocket. Then you would have basically 4 leaves per priming. The bottom priming, already harvested, would be the volado priming. Then you have the seco. You get into the visus, the next 4 leaves, and then you have the ligero, the next 4 leaves. So you probably have here 2 seco, 4 visus, and 4 ligero still left. And then the top, which is like the corona, or like top corona, that would get discarded. The most 2 bottom leaves normally get discarded as well. They're the ones that get dirty, the ones that get kicked around, normally do not have the quality or the body to make it into a cigar.
The tradition, the normal way to the classification of the leaf and the plant have only 3 grades: volado, seco, and ligero. But that means the seco is maybe 60% of the plant. Imagine. That means maybe at least 8 leaves you put in the same grade. And you know that you talk about the leaf 5 and 6. You talk the leaf 11, 12. It's different. But you make the blend according with that. And when they know that some cigars they have a high proportion of seco, especially something like Davidoff number 2, then that time was the best seller of David. And Dr. Snyder smoked every day the first cigar, that cigar. And they called me, Henky, my cigar today is stronger. What happened? What is the problem? First, I divide the seco into 2 different grades. The first, that 4th leaf is seco. The next 4 leaves is visus, with different to maintain the consistency.
The typical cigar smoker doesn't get into the nuances of hey, this cigar tastes lemony acid, or this cigar tastes fruity acid, you know, like an apple.
Sure.
And those terms is very hard for the typical cigar smoker to identify, and it's also very personal. But the typical cigar smoker, especially when they have a cigar that they are very loyal to, let's say, for example, I'm smoking Davidoff No. 2. Davidoff No. 2 is a very mild cigar. If I'm a religious smoker of this cigar and I smoke it every single day, I know what the strength level is of that cigar. And I know my strength level and my comfort level. So the moment that that cigar is a little stronger or is a little lighter, I can pick it up right away.
You get the nuance because that's your blend.
Yeah, so basically this No. 2 is made from the bottom of the plant, 100%.
Okay.
You know, and if for a mistake, a leaf from up here would get in there, and I'm talking 10% of the blend, nothing, half a leaf.
Sure.
I mean, I would immediately be able to pick up the strength level of that cigar. And it would be a little stronger, and it would be not my cigar. It would not be loyal to me.
And that's something you're obviously trying to keep consistent year to year. So, I mean, if it's a slightly stronger blend, will you go from different parts of the plant depending on the particular growing season and how that's impacted the flavor of the leaf and ultimately the resulting cigar?
You're completely correct. So on a sunnier year, that tobacco might be stronger, right? And if that tobacco is stronger, then I have to adapt the blend. The blend is not a formula of a certain percentage, because if I keep those percentages over the different years and I use exactly the same percentages with the next crop that might be stronger, then it ruins my cigar. And I have to make sure to lower that percentage of that tobacco that is stronger, or increase that percentage of that tobacco that is weaker. Or the other option might be, instead of, you maybe use the same 20%, just to say a number,
Sure.
but bring up the level.
Okay.
So there's different ways to play around with it, but the most important thing is that the strength level is always the same, and we're always using the similar ingredients, the same variety, same soil, right, and similar positions of the leaf. That way, it's always more or less the same cigar that you're getting.
So looking for a very consistent flavor profile, and then the crops really dictating how the blend's coming together from that year.
Yeah, so what allows us to be able to play around is that we have inventory. So we have over 5 years worth of inventory. And basically, if we have a crop that doesn't really match, we can also play around with different years, and we can try to blend to that strength level or that flavor profile.
And very similar to what champagne does.
Very similar to what champagne does. You know how in the wine industry, they can measure the amount of sugars inside a grape, right? And then you can taste and you can see at what moment is ready to be harvested. You could technically do that in tobacco, but there's no, let's call it, no gadget that tells you right there. You cannot. You would have to send it to a laboratory and say, hey, it's prime. But what we really do is, or philosophically, we like to say that we talk the tobacco language, right?
Sure.
We can talk tobacco. It's my fourth language. And basically, you have to understand the leaf. And there's 3 main different things that tell you when a leaf is ready to be harvested. First, you can say that its color is changing, or how we like to say its dress is changing. You know, when you're going to go on a voyage, hopefully make it into a Davidoff cigar, right? Sure. You change your clothes. So these intense greens from up here, there's a very intense green. The lower you go, you can see that the greens become less intense. They become lighter, and you can start seeing some shades of yellow start to come in on the sides and in between the veins.
Sure, and the leaf even feels a little different. It's a little bit more furry.
Yeah, this is basically basically losing it's the strength.
Sure.
And instead of pointing up, it's doing a reverence to the soil. So you can start seeing that the leaves, instead of being up, the most bottom ones are gonna start doing this. And then we're saying it's doing a reverence to the soil, saying thank you for all the nutrients, the sunlight, the rainfall. This year, not a lot of rainfall. And basically, now it's saying thank you so that it can go on its journey. And the other thing that will tell you when a leaf is ready or it's not is that a leaf that is ready is not going to resist. It's going to be want to be taken. Where the leaves on top are going to be very flexible, and if I try to break it, like it resists a lot, a leaf that is ready, and let me see if I find one more or less, you should be able to hear a crack. Nope. Wait, see, that one was not really ready. But you should hear a crack, and that's why, you see, it was resisting, so it's not ready. And that's what you do not do in a tobacco farm, because then they get mad at me. But basically, every 2 leaves, every 3 days, and sadly, this one was really not too ready. It was doing the reverence, but not enough. It's still too intense green. But basically, you would hear a very loud crack, and when you send in 30 people to harvest all at one time, you're just hearing clack, 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 and we say it's like music.
Yeah. The rhythm of the farm. So.
And the one beat rhythm of the farm.
Okay, Klaus, so we're here in January, and at dinner last night you were explaining that you've only had about 1 millimeter of rainfall in December, which is way below the averages. So what kind of average rainfall do you expect here?
In this region, we're normally expecting about 60 millimeters to 80 millimeters of rainfall every month. So vast difference. Every region differs, but 1 millimeter of rainfall in December is not enough. We're not done with January. We've had a little bit more, but it's still very, very, very dry. So it comes down to two things. Either you depend on God, you pray every day that it rains, or you invest. In this particular farm, we have invested, obviously. We have a well where we can amass amounts of water, and then we can irrigate the farm. In this particular area, there's also rice grown, so we actually get water given to this farm 3 times a week. So every three times a week, we're able to fill up the well and make sure that we always have water for the rest of the crop. And then with a pump, we basically shoot the water all the way up to the top of the farm, and then by gravity, it just irrigates all of this.
There's all these channels we can see. So this isn't built here to kind of divert rainwater. This is purposely built for irrigation purposes.
This is purposely built for irrigation purposes. You can see the tobacco plants are on the top of the mounds. We move the mounds accordingly. You can also see that there's also like a white powder where the tobacco is growing. That's the remains of the fertilizer that we also pump into the water system. And basically we are able to irrigate and also fertilize at the same time. Different farms do it differently. There's aspersion, there's also by drop system. So every farm is different. In this one, because we have a really nice incline, we are able to irrigate through gravity. Now what the yield is, that's a whole nother topic, because you could argue a very sunny year, yes, you're gonna have very thick tobacco, but in general, a very sunny year means that the flower comes out earlier. It also means that you're probably gonna get a smaller plant, right? Smaller plant. Not in this case, because we've invested here. But what happens is that you look at other farms that have not done the investment, and the plants won't grow as much because they don't have water to grow.
Sure.
But
does that lack of growth, does that help the flavor profile in any way?
Sunnier year, again, means a stronger tobacco, more, you could say more flavorful tobacco. But in regards to yield, some people might have just a very bad year because they have no rainfall at all. But if you have the investment, you're still able to get your tobacco plant to grow quite big. And then what's nice is because it's sunnier, the tobacco plant is thicker, and you sell by weight. So as a farmer, when you have thicker leaves, you might have a smaller plant, but you have a heavier leaf, so the yield doesn't vary that much.
Okay.
You know, as long as you have an okay year. I mean,
sure.
It's all up to chance, right? It's all up to weather. But as long as you have an okay year, a dry year doesn't mean bad. Sometimes we even prefer drier year, because after growing the tobacco, what we call our second crop is a curing barn. And it's 45 days that if you mess that up, you invested and you wasted all your time, because you did a great effort here, and then the curing barn, you messed it up. And the curing barn, the humidity has to be very stable. And dry years allow us to control the humidity inside a curing barn much better.
Are there different diseases or pests that, you know, favor a particular type of weather condition, or are there some that kind of appear all the time?
Well, some insects appear no matter what. But for example, in Dominican Republic, on very dry years for the last 5-6 years, we've been seeing the tomato virus show up. This little insect that carries the tomato virus. Tobacco and the tomato plant are the same family, so Solanaceae plants, and basically, or nightshade plants, and basically it transfers over. It started happening some years ago, and now on dry years it's apparent. Rain normally washes away the insect. So what you really want is an average year in rainfall. You don't want too much rainfall, because now if you have too much rainfall, then mold starts to come. Blue mold is very typical. And then that's another disease that is not apparent on dry years, which we're thankful for, but on very wet years, it could be disastrous. We always see a 1%, 2% on very dry years of yield loss, but when it first struck in the country, nobody was prepared. The country lost over 30% of its total tobacco production.
Wow, that's huge.
And I mean, people that were ready, like in this farm, we lost about 5% due to that virus. So we were very preemptive. We were able to act upon it, but some people weren't so lucky. And when I say 30%, that's the average countrywide. Some people lost their entire crop.
If you only lost 5%, then someone else has got to lose
a lot,
significantly more
a bigger chunk
to make that up, you know. So.
Yeah, I mean, sorry for them, but it's something that now we have been working on for some years, and now we as a country are more prepared. So it's not the end of the world, and you just have to adapt with the times.
Sure. And then at the other end of the scale with the blue mold, is there any way you can mitigate that, or is it just a little bit tougher because of the raw moisture and humidity in the air?
It's a little tougher, but basically you try to look at the plants that are infected. You try to take those plants out. You try to basically...
You'll take the whole plant away.
I mean, I see tomato virus, or I see a plant that is infected with something, rip that whole thing out. And make sure it doesn't spread to anywhere else. And then I try to make sure that water is not settling anywhere, because water settling in some part of the farm can be disastrous, because that can be a great breeding area for blue mold.
Sure.
And then blue mold is also something that happens per country. Some countries doesn't even get that. And then varieties also have to be planted accordingly. So we know that certain varieties are stronger against blue mold than others. So we know that some areas are more prone to getting blue mold because it has more rainfall. Then we plant varieties that are stronger against that. So we also plant varieties not only to flavor, but also to resistance to diseases. You have very dry years like this year. You have very wet years like 3 years ago. I think it rained nonstop for the whole month of November, December, and January.
Sure.
You have, it's very cycles, and then you have years right in the middle. We always plan after hurricane season in Dominican Republic, so that's out of the question. Because always people ask me, what about hurricanes that hit Dominican Republic? We always plan after. And then what allows us is also, in farms like this, is because we plant in stages, we're able to basically spread out the risk. So not the whole farm is getting flooded on, or not the whole farm is getting just dry. So we're hoping that that third stage that we just started last week,
so is it 3 total stages you're doing then?
In this farm.
And then how spread out are those stages?
20 to 30 days.
Okay, so you're going to get kind of a month between...
Yeah, you try to give them about a month, and that way you basically 1 month might have been dry, but hopefully the next month rains a little more.
Like 3 years ago you had a lot of rain, this year you're very dry, so it seems...
Last year was a very even year.
Well, very good. So, is it like a third almost? Or
I hope so. So really, we kind of just go out there and we just do it on a day-to-day basis.
I suppose whatever you're dealt with, you've got to deal with regardless. I mean, percentages are all good, but you know, if it's not raining or it is raining, then it doesn't matter what the percentages say. You got to just deal with it. You know.
I mean, all the averages what really do is like they help you better prepare for next year. So you basically.
So whatever particular cigars selling well that you'll know to.
Well,
you know, was it
yes,
like how,
we can
when
think that far ahead, but
but
I'm thinking preparing more in amounts of fertilizer I'm going to be buying, amounts of insecticides I'm going to be buying. So I have averages of my yearly consumptions, you know, and I have averages of how much money I'm spending even on gas, you know, to transport things. So all these averages are just things that help me prepare for next year, for the next crop, so I can have a ballpark number of I know how much money I'm spending every single week. And because this is basically a week-to-week operation. That's how we're handling this farm.
Sadly, there was no harvesting that day, so we couldn't appreciate the romantic imagery of that one-beat rhythm of the farm. However, the barns were very much active, and Klaas took us inside to explain the fundamentals of the curing process.
So what's actually happening in this building?
Well, at this point, the leaf is continuing their journey to hopefully make it into a Davidoff cigar, right?
Yeah.
It's already starting to change its colors inside this curing barn. But we're bringing in the leaf, and we're gonna be basically sewing the leaf onto these bamboo sticks. And when we sew them, we're going to be grabbing these two leaves. You can see here, this leaf had a little insect, right? That was biting through inside. Let's flip it. We're gonna be sewing them right here in the center vein, into the center vein, the big vein, about 1 inch down.
And you're putting them spine to spine.
Yeah, back to back. The reason being is because when they're drying, they're gonna be drying and folding inward. So, or in this case, outward. If you put them front to front, they're gonna fold onto each other, and then basically they're not gonna have enough room to breathe. We want the leaves to have enough space and enough room to breathe because the leaf is about 85% water inside, and the other 15% is dry material. And if all this water is not being able to exit, then it can leave for the leaf to rot.
So, during that 45-day period, is there a kind of estimate of how much moisture content you want the leaf to lose as it's going from green to yellows into brown?
Well, the leaf, you'll start seeing that the edges will start changing to yellows first. It all is transitioning. At one moment, you have all three beautiful colors. But when you start seeing the yellows, that part of the leaf at that moment has lost about 50% of the initial water that it had. And then when it's starting to turn into brown, now it's losing about another 25% of that moisture. You always want the leaf to be moist. You never want to dry it completely. If you dry a leaf at any moment, you're stopping the physical changes and the chemical changes on the leaf. So for example, candela wrapper, right? Candela wrapper is green leaves of tobacco that have been dried green. What they do is they heat up the curing barn, and overnight they dry the leaf, and basically because it's 100% dry, or not 100% dry, but dry, it will forever be green. You have stopped all the the physical changes and the chemical changes of that leaf, and will forever be green and also taste different.
Sure. And as I look up here, we've probably got a 25-foot ceiling, and just imagine there's 5 or 6 different racks. I mean, are you rotating those racks during the 45 days? And if so, why are you moving the leaves around?
The environment in here, we're trying to maintain it as stable as possible, but also the leaves need to be treated exactly the same or as evenly as possible. So it's kind of like a FIFO, like a first in, first out kind of deal, where when the leaves are being sewn onto these sticks, they first end up on the outside, and the next time they get moved up, they end up in the center. And they get next time they get moved up, they get put in the outside. The top leaves are the older leaves. Heat rises, so if from the bottom it's nice and cooler, and the top is hotter.
How are outside conditions impacting what happens in here, and do you do anything to kind of stabilize the environment within here?
We want basically in temperature and also around humidity. We want about 85% humidity in here, 80, 85. You want temperature also between 80, 90 Fahrenheit.
Sure.
We gotta make sure that's
American and non-American audience. So
and but basically we have to control this humidity. If, for example, it's a very dry year like this one, what we have to do is we have to close the curing barn and make sure the humidity doesn't exit the curing barn. And what we can also do in case we need to add humidity is we can add water on the ground, and that will increase the humidity inside the curing barn. On a very wet year, we have to do exactly the opposite. We got to open up the doors to release humidity, and if need be, we can also put some charcoal, heat it up, on the floor, and that way increase humidity. This is a filler and binder farm, so that's the more traditional way. But in farms, for example, like in Yamasa, where it's a wrapper farm and we have to be a lot more delicate and much more equal and even, we even have invested into gas panels and a pipe system.
Okay.
So that way, evenly the whole curing barn is being moistened or dried at the same rate.
Of course, this wasn't the farm's only curing barn, and Klaas took us to another one that was at a later stage of the curing process. After a quick inspection, he showed Paul and I some specimens from earlier primings.
The last curing barn was bringing in the leaves right after harvest. At this moment, here you're gonna find some second priming leaves. So this is all the way from the bottom, and those leaves behind me that are green, those leaves are third priming. So you can see that just a couple day difference of harvest. These are like 3 days later being harvested. These are still green. These have already started changing color dramatically. You also have to take into account that these leaves here are thinner, so they will dry out sooner than the ones that are higher up in the priming. The ones higher up in primings will last longer drying here inside the curing barn.
Are you still going to put these thinner leaves in here for 45 days along with the top ones? It doesn't matter what part of the plant it comes from.
As long as the humidity is inside the curing barn is stable and everything, they can stay here all they want.
Okay.
It is actually just logistically a lot easier to wait for all the leaves inside the curing barn to finish their process. And they will be maintained with the same humidity, the same process, and they will just be now just dry, but just waiting for their other counterparts just to finish their process. So it'll be fine. There's no need to worry there.
Okay, great.
But what's cool here is that you can see all the colors. This one is pretty much finished. Here you can see some greens. Now this is a beautiful one.
Wow, look at that.
So here you can see a lot of green here. You can start seeing the yellows coming in on the borders, right where the brown is, and then you can see all this brown down here. Then definitely you can start smelling the tobacco aroma.
It's definitely not as fresh. It's not that kind of fresh cut grass, kind of green smell you can get. That tobacco.
It's intermingled here because you got both.
Yeah, you can still a little sweetness, but you can still.
Yeah, now you're actually starting to smell that normal tobacco smell that you're more accustomed to.
Mm-hmm.
Again, basically it's a 3-part process where you have the green, the yellow, and the brown. And if you were to dry the leaf when it's green, at that moment you're basically gonna be tasting like candela wrapper. It's gonna taste very green, very vegetable-like. If you are gonna be smoking a leaf that is very yellow, it would taste very sweet, very sugary, all the sucrose and fructose converting. And then when you actually dry it out to the brown stage, you're smoking that part, that's what you know as cigars, right? Of course, very raw, no fermentation, no aging still done on that leaf itself. What's interesting is that this smell that you're smelling, it's chemical thing happening here in the leaf. So you have in the cell the phenol and the phenol oxidaxa separated by a small cell membrane, and when the leaf is basically withering away and the cell wall disappears, those two come into contact. Because that cell membrane has disappeared, you got the oxidation of phenols, and that's when really the aromas start coming up, right? You see this all the time. Typical day example, right? You got an apple, apple falls from the tree. That side of the apple that hit the ground will have changed in color, will have changed in texture, smell, and taste. Mm-hmm. That side matured quicker or matured by trauma, by impact.
Sure.
This is what's happening here, but in a very slow, controlled environment. If I were to take my fingers and press the leaf would turn color, and I would be forcibly putting the phenol and the phenol oxidaxa into contact. And that's not what we want.
And causing that trauma like the apple dropping.
Exactly.
Like
we don't want no traumas on the leaf. That's why you see here that the leaves, you have 2 on this side, back to back, 2 on this side, 2 on this side, and you can see that they all have a lot of room and a lot of space to breathe. That way they're releasing the humidity in the water at a nice, evenly pace, and that way is as even as possible for this 45-day period.
Sure. And once the leaf turns brown, I mean, if you were to, not age this tobacco and ferment it, what would a kind of a typical flavor profile be? Would it be bitter, or like what's the...
So the last thing to dry on the leaf is the center vein.
Sure.
So the center vein is what contains the most water, so you have to wait for that to dry out.
Right, completely.
But at that moment, that tobacco is basically what you would similarly see in a cigar. The only problem, the only difference is that basically that tobacco has not gone through all the processes to be refined. So it hasn't gone through the fermentation that's going to lower all the carbohydrates, all the nitrogenous elements. It's going to reduce the alkaloid nicotine. It's going to reduce all these harsh elements. It hasn't gone through the aging that makes the tobacco a lot more noble, a lot more even. And without all that, if you smoke it right off the curing barn, it's gonna taste what you know, but it's gonna be harsh, and it's going to kind of rip apart your throat, you know, especially if it's from the top of the plant. The bottom leaves of the plant, like this one, is just second priming. You might be able to smoke it, but it's still, you're gonna feel some harshness. You might feel some dirty aftertaste, and it won't be as pure.
In order to achieve Davidoff's refinement standards, some of that tobacco will still require at least 2 more years of fermentation. But this won't take place in the curing barns. As Klaas's father was being interviewed on national television, we quietly left the fields and returned to Davidoff's greenhouses. However, we walked right past them and instead entered a nearby warehouse bearing the brand's name.
Right now we are in fermentation warehouse for binder and wrapper. This is a warehouse that has many piles of tobacco, averaging about 4,000 pounds each one of these piles, some a little more.
Wow.
And basically you got wrapper, you got binder. This specific pile of tobacco that we are flipping right now is Yamasa binder.
So this is from the Dominican.
Yeah, this
from
is
your
Dominican wrapper, or Dominican binder. The wrapper is actually in another pile right now. We have 4,557 pounds between these two. And what they're doing is they're flipping this pile and remaking it over there.
Okay.
So
How many times is that happening? How frequently?
In this specific case, we are already in the second fermentation. It's happened 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 times. We're flipping it and trying to make sure that the outside ends up being in the middle, that the bottom ends up on the top, and in 11 times, pretty much these leaves end up everywhere.
Sure.
But what ends up happening is that it takes about 4 people in about 4 hours to flip it.
Wow. That's actually a lot quicker than I thought it would be.
Yeah.
This is pretty intense.
Yeah, it's very labor intensive. And normally what happens is we're checking really at temperature. Fermentation is very easy. Fermentation, in my mind, is a very simple equation. It's volume or weight, right? Weight plus humidity equals heat. If you have volume or weight and no humidity, then nothing happens. Heat does not rise. If you have no volume, very little volume, you have a lot of humidity, the tobacco rots. Heat doesn't get created and tobacco rots. So you need a combination of both. What we do is that we have a thermometer that goes right in the middle of it, and basically we're looking at the temperature. So you can look at the second fermentation, right? Which is all binder. And we can look at the temperature in Fahrenheit rise. So the first time the pile was made, it was 89, 91, 70, 97, 99, 102, 106. The temperature was rising too much, and we decided to flip it.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, that way, what we do is we take a handle, right? Just as an example, we take a handle and we do this, and we air it out. We lower the temperature, and then basically.
How heavy is it? That's probably about a pound, maybe a little less.
About.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's about a pound. Normally, 2.5 pounds is about that much.
Okay.
Right.
The smell in here is amazing. That's one thing you want to comment on. It's so sweet, the aromas.
The smell here varies. You never know.
It smells
what's
good right now to me, anyway.
You never know what's gonna happen.
You get some funk coming out somewhere. So, and then does this represent like 1 year's crop? You won't mix years, or do you mix years? Like, how does that work?
This is lot 102. This is last year's crop.
Last year's crop.
Yeah. So this is crop 2017, 2018.
So this has already been flipped 10 times, and we're only 1 year into the process, and it could be here for 5 years, or does that 5-year aging, is it always in this room, or does it, once it hits a certain point, it ages somewhere else?
So tobacco from the bottom of the plant, meaning volado seco, needs less time. Tobacco from the top of the plant, like ligeros, need more time. These are tobaccos that have more nitrogenous elements in the leaf and have more elements to work with. So fermentation can last anywhere from a very sped up process of 6 months, up to 2 years.
Okay.
So we're a year in, and this is tobacco from the third group, meaning it is more or less a seco. Because in Yamasa we do 8 groups. Instead of dividing in 4, we divide in 8 because wrapper, we're a little bit more precise. The veins are not very pronounced. You can see it's stretchy and it's oily. So this is more or less from the bottom of the plant. This is a little lighter tone. These are watermarks. We don't have to worry about that. That is a mark. So again, this is all binder, so it doesn't matter because it's gonna be inside. It's already been classified. You could argue that you get one good side of wrapper here, and this probably is gonna be binder. So it gets classified as binder because one of the leaves is binder.
Sure.
But basically, this is from the bottom of the plant, and maybe a couple more flips, and they'll decide that it's ready. So this is a pile that's being flipped. And you can stick your hand in here.
Oh wow. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's nice and warm.
Yeah, moist as well. You can feel.
Yep. You can feel the humidity.
Yeah.
So this is a tobacco that's from the bottom of the plant. So there's not a lot of strong aromas here. But when you have a tobacco from the top of the plant or a very strong seed, this room is filled with very strong smells. And you can tell that the tobacco that's being flipped is a very strong one. Because what's happening in fermentation is not just heat, but in essence, the tobacco is sweating out all the bad stuff. So we're talking about is sweating out the carbohydrates, the acidity, the proteins, the alkaloid, nicotine, you know. So we're basically reducing all these harsh elements so that when you smoke it, it doesn't leave a harsh aftertaste. And it's pleasant, and it's only about aroma and taste.
Speaking of sweating it out, Klaas took a moment to show us Davidoff's 5-star sauna, a special room designed to provide the tobacco with additional humidity during the fermentation process.
So when you see the fermentation temperature drop, and you notice that it's missing humidity, we gotta open up all the tobacco again. It's missing humidity, so we put it in here, and that way the tobacco gets humidity all by air, no direct contact. It's all in the atmosphere, as you can obviously see in our beautiful sauna. It's basically adding humidity indirectly, you know? And that way these tobacco leaves do not get stained. And all these veins. We will basically leave it here overnight. At the end of the day, we just turn it off and it just stays in there. And in the morning, it's nice. There's no excess humidity, and it's nice and humid to remake the pile the next day.
Sure.
Already.
And then you're getting back in that cycle to become stabilized again.
Yeah, you go back into the cycle, you see the temperature rise, it goes back down, and it's sometimes up to a 2-year process.
Oh, wow.
Just of this. But how do you know when it's ready?
Yeah,
that's the question.
A big question, yeah.
Well, you have to smoke it. You gotta try it. But one of the good ways to know is that you see here, that you see the temperature is rising. 89, 91, 97, 99, 102, 106, and we flip it, the temperature was too high. So then we redo the pile again. You see 94, 108, 111, 114, 115, and then it starts to go down, 110, 110. What happened was that the humidity was missing. So
Sure.
humidity is missing, so temperature starts to go down. So we gotta flip it and add humidity again. Next time around, it's 90, 90, 90, 91, 92. It's very stable. It stays at 95. You're saying, hey, it's very stable. Let's flip it. Let's see if we can get some more heat into it. Let's add more humidity. Next time around, it ended lagging about 105. And look how long it lasted before we flipped it.
Flip. So it's getting more stable.
It's getting more stable. It's getting more stable.
Sure.
So this is an indication that soon this will be ready.
Okay.
You know, just by looking at the numbers, I know that there's maybe 1 or 2 more flips on this, and it's probably going to be ready.
Although we might be jumping ahead of ourselves, if this seemed like a lot of tobacco, you might not be prepared for Davidoff's storage warehouse. Hidden somewhere in the basement of their main factory, the vast room is somewhat reminiscent of the Raiders of the Lost Ark's final scene, as well as Davidoff's secret weapon for ensuring consistency.
We are able to keep the consistency and also to keep the quality of our products based on an important thing that we have, which is the inventory. Okay? When I'm talking about inventory, I'm talking about tobacco inventory, cigars inventory. So, because this is the first thing that normally gives you the opportunity to respond.
Sure.
If you have a new request or a change in your request. This is one element, key element internally. But also, we have, like I said before, good communication with headquarters And we all the time, we normally plans everything ahead.
Sure.
Which means all the time we have the possibility to react.
So some of these tobaccos, Klaus, are like packed in these Hessian bags. Some of them are in boxes, some are in a linen material. Is there any reason for the differential?
Basically, normally different packaging means that it's coming from a different location.
Okay.
From a different supplier, or it hasn't been processed in a certain way, so different packaging means different things. Normally, a lot of the boxes that you see, basically it's tobacco that inside is packed in with wax paper.
Sure.
You know, and it's packed in a different style. And
would that be a lot of wrapper because it's not getting compressed as much?
Yeah, it's all wrapper. Actually, this room is all wrapper.
Oh wow.
All of this is wrapper.
Even
but
stuff
you can feel that there's cardboard
there's
in
cardboard
here.
inside.
It's
Okay.
not packed. The tobacco is not up against the ute.
Sure.
This is also just protection for what's inside as well.
Sure.
You know, it's a much rougher, much more durable, and for transportation.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of wrapper. This goes back quite a ways.
Yeah. But just so you have an idea, each one of these is weighing anywhere between 100 and 130 pounds. And not all of this is grade 1 wrapper, but grade 1 wrapper is what goes into Davidoff. But grade 1 wrapper, Connecticut seed from Ecuador, right now in the market, it's over $50 a pound. So just one of these, 100 pounds times 50, you got about $5,000, probably more.
Just chilling there.
Just chilling here for a couple years.
And how many leaves would be in a pound, like usable wrapper leaves?
Depends if it's a very heavy wrapper or a very light wrapper, but we're talking probably 30 per handle, and then there might be 100 handles in there, right? So you're talking about 300, more or less.
Sure.
Maybe more, probably more. It depends. We also have some that are 200 pounds, but for wrapper we don't go normally above 130 pounds per bale.
But this is only just one step. There's obviously, hundreds steps, once you get to this point.
This is aging. This is after all the sorting, after all the fermentation. This is after everything. This is just sitting here ready, basically in wrapper in many cases, ready to be rolled. And it's basically inventory that we have.
So this is all pre-sorted,
When it comes to Connecticut, yes.
Okay. So you could just pop this out and theoretically get rolling this afternoon.
Pretty soon. No, because you still have to humidify it. You still have to take out the center vein. You still have to sort it by size and by color.
Oh, okay.
But this is, in essence, 1 or 2 months away from being rolled.
Sure.
But we're talking, we have over 50,000 bales or 5 million pounds of tobacco aging. Not all of that is wrapper, but it's an inventory that is pretty significant, and it's not only significant in its size, but it's significant in its money value.
Sure.
So that's an investment that Davidoff is doing to make sure that your cigars are well fermented or well aged, and all the tobacco has gone through all the processes needed, so that when it gets to your cigar, it's in perfect condition.
Because this stuff's going to be in here for effectively a minimum of 5 years on average.
Filler for sure.
Filler
wrapper
for sure.
a little less.
Little less for wrapper.
Yeah. Wrapper less, binder more, filler more.
Sure.
Filler can withstand the test of time longer. Wrapper, we don't want it breaking. If it's ready, we can put it on there. But basically, imagine the inventory. Imagine the finance guys. All this sitting tobacco, all this sitting money, just sitting here.
Sure.
But that's the investment.
But ultimately, if it takes 3 years, 5 years for the best cigar, then that's what it takes, So
Yeah, and if it takes 13 years, that's what it takes.
Yep.
We don't cut any corners, and that's very important. The time that it takes to create a cigar, it's also the time it takes to get that tobacco to that perfect condition. And we're not cutting any corners at any moment, so that the tobacco is in perfect condition, so your cigar is always as perfect as humanly possible when it reaches your hands.
As the staff in the aging facility wrapped up their shift for lunch, we quickly crossed the courtyard to another building. In this multi-purpose facility, the ground floor was particularly busy, and Klaas explained that all C-grade tobacco deemed unsuitable for Davidoff was bundled here to be distributed to other machine-made cigar factories. Meanwhile, the floor above hosted several complex and meticulous processes.
This room is what we call the texture department. So basically we bring the tobacco here, and the ladies here, they sort the tobacco only by touch. Not by sight, only by touch. So basically their hands is what's telling them how thick is the tobacco, how many oils it has. And what this allows us to do is to resort it and make sure that's in the right level. Because we sort it in the farm, many mistakes can be made at that moment.
Sure.
We sort it when it gets here. Mistakes can happen, but the biggest thing is that we start working in the tobacco. We start fermenting it, we start aging it, we start working with it, and the tobacco can change.
I decided to, after the fermentation, after the first 2 years aging, make a new sorting, only by texture, to reduce that mistake. And sometimes it's no mistake. It's question of land and weather. Suppose you have a land not perfect flat and rain, and one area maintain more time the water. That means that that plant receiving the nutrient more dilution, and that leaf in the same position or the other plant close to them, it's different. And for that reason, I make another classification.
So we sort it just to make sure that it is in the right level, and that way it's not going to overpower or be too soft for your cigar.
So all of these are obviously the same leaves. And then once they categorize them in different texture, thus oils, are these different leaves going to be applied to different blends as a result?
Yes. So for example, your Davidoff number 2, that's from the bottom of the plant, right?
Sure.
It's going to be using seco. It's going to be using, I think, some volado in there, and you're going to have only tobacco from the bottom of the plant. What happens is the company says, hey, we need seco, and they're going to grab from the primings that would be seco, and they're going to sort. They're going to find mainly seco, and they might find some visus, they might find something else, but we can already tell here that this is the tobacco that they've sorted. And basically you have, from today's tobacco that they sorted, you have some ligero. You can see the color is darker, but not all the colors are the same. So color tricks you.
Sure.
And you can see that the texture is very, very thick and very oily.
Oh yeah.
Right? And then you can see that they also sorted.
So that's why they're not even looking at the leaves, they're literally just relying on that feel.
Literally on feel.
Not to be fooled by it.
This is seco, this is from the bottom of the plant. And you can see that some are very light colored. For example, this one.
Sure.
And then some are darker colored. But they are more or less the same texture.
Yeah.
You know? So you can feel this, and they're more or less the same texture.
Yeah, I mean, my untrained fingers can't tell the difference. So,
right?
Yeah.
And you got 2 leaves, they're completely different color.
Yeah, I mean, if I looked at that, I'd be, well,
They're
that's
different.
Yeah. So, yeah.
So this is important for sorting. And then
So color's not really imparting any sort of flavor. We're just looking at the texture and the oils.
color doesn't tell you how strong the leaf is.
It doesn't give you any indication.
Yeah. People say Maduro is strong.
Sure.
And you're like, no, Maduro is a term of color. But they associate in the industry a dark color with strength. And now even blenders and companies are making Maduro cigars to be stronger, which in the past was not necessarily true. Yeah. But the industry has evolved to make it easier on the consumer, because they see a dark color, they automatically associate dark with strong. But it is all about the oils, it's all about the texture, it's all about the nutrients that's inside the leaf. Mm-hmm. And that's what's gonna really determine flavor and then strength.
Sure.
And then here you got visus. You can see completely different colors again. And this is higher up in the plant than seco. Come on.
Oh yeah, night and day. Even I can tell the difference between those two browns. No female eyes required.
And then they're literally, you can feel them, and it's the same texture.
Yeah. Yeah.
They are the same strength. They look completely different, they're the same strength. They're both visus, they're both year 2012, 2013, so we're looking at tobacco that is 5-6 years old. We got San Vicente from, it was harvested from the top of the plant, which ended up being Visus, and it's actually from Zone 7, Jicama, the farm we visited this morning.
Oh wow.
After the texture department, we have the room where we are deveining the filler. So basically, the ladies have little knives in their fingers that actually take out about half of the filler, you know, center vein.
Ah, okay.
Most cigars have center veins in the center. That's normal, you know.
Just all this stuff on the floor.
Yep, that's all there. It's normal. They stick only the very thick. That's not gonna go into your cigar, but the thin part is gonna go into your cigar. That actually helps for construction.
Okay,
So that's actually good. It holds the filler together, and then you can fold accordingly to make your cigar. Accordion style in our case.
Sure.
And you can see the knife. Enséñale, por favor. So you can see that with this knife, she makes the incision into the leaf and then really quickly removes the vein. And what's really cool is that she gets it already open, and at this moment, she's already sizing the leaf already. So basically, you're gonna be going the big leaves to the big cigars and the small leaves to the small cigars.
Small, medium.
Already humidified, the leaf open, the texture decided, the size decided, and the vein removed. So at this moment, in essence, in a couple months, it could be at the rolling floor being rolled once the factory needs it.
Okay, so this stuff's basically ready to go whenever it's needed.
Yep, or we can put it into aging for a long time if it's not needed.
The process for deveining filler tobacco was remarkably artisanal, but what of the binder and the wrapper? To see how these tobaccos were deveined and sorted, we left the current facility for Davidoff's main factory, where we witnessed a more mechanized and somewhat louder process.
So we have here humidified tobacco already. You can open up the leaf, introduce it into the machine, and basically at that moment, the vein is completely stripped and you get this tobacco here, and it's nice and perfectly cut. It's super soft.
Yeah, to the touch, you can feel how soft and moist the tobacco is.
And it is wrapper, and then it's gonna go to sorting. The binder goes here, the wrapper goes somewhere else. It's gonna be sorted differently. But both binder and wrapper come through these machines.
So the whole entire vein's removed, the center vein.
Yep. About 30% of the total weight of the leaf. After the binder has gone through the machines, have been completely deveined, they come here, and we have to sort them by size and by quality. No color because the binder goes inside the cigar, right? Sure. So we have here big, medium, small, and then any leftovers, scrap gets put off to the side, or anything that might be considered filler. Like here you can see some filler. That's filler. That's scrap, that's filler. And basically, it gets sorted by size. The big leaves go to the bigger cigars. The smaller leaves get sorted to the smaller cigars. Once it has been already sorted by size and quality, the binder then goes on to the next step. And over here, the ladies back here, all they're doing is counting packets of 50. So 50. And from 50 leaves or 50 half leaves, when we give it to the cigar roller, he has to give me 50 cigars.
Okay.
In the meantime, the wrapper is sent to a much calmer room on the floor above. Despite there being considerably less machinery, the microphone nevertheless still struggled under carefully configured air conditioning and crisp neon lighting.
So this is the wrapper department. This is right after the wrapper goes through the machines downstairs that basically devein the leaf into two. So you can see they're sorting it by size, big, medium, small, and then also color. So you gotta look at the top side of the leaf, not the bottom side of the leaf. They put them all with the same vein, facing the same way, right? What's interesting is that you can see they all have their water bottles, so they're always keeping it nice and moist. There's good lighting, it's all bright, and there's black background. Again, it's only ladies. We're in the wrapper department. This is very expensive tobacco. We do not want any tough hands breaking our leaves. But also, the ladies are just more patient, delicate, and have better eyesight for the colors.
So they're able to discern colors better. We have over 50 different shades of brown that we are basically sorting our tobacco in. Now that the tobacco is more or less ready for assembling into a cigar, what was the next step given Davidoff's overwhelming selection of tobacco varieties? To answer this question, Klaas introduced us to Eladio Diaz, Davidoff's master blender.
Mi nombre es Eladio Diaz, master blender Davidoff. Liga al año, más o menos yo hago entre 20 a 25 ligas diferentes en el transcurso del mes. En realidad para nosotros es sencillo. Si Suiza necesita un puro específico, un cigarro específico con líneas específicas de sabores, como tenemos el conocimiento de las 15 zonas que manejamos, para nosotros es sencillo, es como un chef, es elegir las hojas acorde con la coordenada que nos mandan de Suiza. Hay ligas que uno la sueña, que uno se la imagina, ¿no? Cuando yo iba para Ecuador el martes pasado, le mando la descripción de una liga al jefe de galera con un capote específico que me daba la nota de spicy y andaba buscando esa combinación de elementos con ese capote específico. Automáticamente yo sé cuando ando buscando una nota normal, o sea que yo sé que me va a aportar. Entonces para mí es muy sencillo, pues yo conozco los elementos, gracias a Dios. Regularmente las pruebas, como yo lo hago la mayoría de las ligas con 7 elementos, 5 tripas y capote y capa, ando buscando siempre un diámetro entre 52 y 54 de diámetro. Regularmente siempre se hace un cigarro medio, no un cigarro que esté en el top. No es porque sea mi gusto predilecto, sino porque en realidad un puro para que sea agradable, tiene que ser no invasivo. El cigarro tiene que estar equilibrado, balanceado. Si no tiene esas condiciones, no es un puro agradable para mi concepto.
This is the blending department, and here they're going to be weighing certain amounts of tobacco to create a bag that the blend is already created. And basically this blend is going to be given to the cigar roller, and he is going to have the tobaccos already separated. We do it in a bag of 40 ounces. If it's a very strong blend, these 40 ounces are going to be made out of less leaves because they're heavier tobaccos. Sure. If it's a very light blend, the 40 ounces are gonna be made up of tobacco that's lighter. So it's gonna be for more cigars. So you have here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tobaccos. And this basically, each tobacco is crossed and weighed separately so that when cigar roller gets it, he's basically getting all the tobaccos already separated and already more or less position of where they have to place it in their hand. So this is actually our Davidoff Cigar. So this is the blend for Davidoff Cigar what we had last night. So you see here that it has 2 tobaccos from Brazil, which is the Cubra and the Matafina that we're talking about. The Cubra, that's the binder, is not going to be here because it's only filler. And then you see that there's also some Piloto, some tobacco from Bonao, and then some San Vicente. The tobacco from Bonao is a hybrid that we have, which is 119. And then we have San Vicente that basically rounds off the side. So you have your sweet Cubra, your spicy Matafina, and then Piloto that hits in the back, and then the sides are the San Vicente and also your hybrid. And basically this is a very easy blend where 40 ounces is basically divided by 5 is 20%, 20%, 20%, 20%, 20%. It's 8 ounces each leaf.
They just rotate depending.
And depending if they're doing, because we have a huge list, if they're doing the Corona Gorda or the Robusto or the Toro, they're gonna basically make a different amount of cigars. Sure. If they are supposed to make, for let's say 40 cigars, and they're making me 45 cigars, that means they're putting too little tobacco in the blend, and the cigar is gonna be too loose. So if they're making me 35 cigars, then they're putting too much tobacco and they're basically wasting tobacco, and the cigar is going to be too tight.
Potential draw issues.
And potential draw issues, exactly. So basically at that moment, this becomes also a quality control. For every 40 ounces that we make, depending on the size, they have to give me a certain number of cigars. And if they're not giving me that certain number of cigars, there's an issue.
It could be whatever. It could be the quality of tobacco we're giving him. It could be how he's rolling it. But there's always an issue that needs to be fixed.
That's another. If someone's making 500 cigars a day, there's roughly 12 additional quality control checks on the amount of filler that's in a particular cigar.
It's countless. The amount of quality controls is ridiculous.
So every single stage is another fail-safe, another fail-safe, another fail-safe.
And these 40 ounces, not only are the tobaccos weighed separately, but then they get weighed all together. And at the moment that it leaves this room and to the next place, it gets scanned, there's a ticket, it goes into a system, and it was weighed, and then it gets to the next place. And when it's received in the next place, we weigh it again to just double make sure that we're getting the right weight or the amount of quantity of tobacco. What's really cool is that, like how we discussed, the blend can change. Maybe in the future, it doesn't have to be 20-20-20-20, and the blend can be maybe 25, and then you add up to 100, but you play around with the ratios and the weights. Sure. So this cookbook in 6 months is irrelevant because some of these already changed.
Sure.
You know, and it's not consistent if you're always keeping exactly the same blend year after year.
Sure. Perfect.
Gracias, super.
Gracias.
Ustedes pueden seguir trabajando.
Gracias.
If you were to imagine the cigar manufacturing process, the first picture that would probably enter your mind is cigars being furiously rolled on rows of benches. Indeed, this practice has been heavily romanticized, with stories like cigars rolled on virgins' thighs. Whether this legend was ever true in Cuba, it would unlikely pass Davidoff's uncompromising quality control.
We have here Julio Martinez, who's one of our master rollers, crafting one of our most iconic cigars, which is a Davidoff Special R. This cigar is comprised of 3 fillers, very typical Davidoff tobaccos that we have already seen in our tour of the factory. Olor Dominicano, Piloto, and San Vicente. That's Piloto. That one in the nose, you will feel a lot more peppery, right? You have some Olor Dominicano. Olor Dominicano is going to be a little sweeter in the nose. It's a lot lighter. You can see it also has less body, so it's just less intense. And you got some San Vicente. You can see that the leaf structure of this leaf is a lot wider. And then San Vicente is also a little lighter than Piloto, but it has more body on the nose than the Olor Dominicano. The binder is moist, right? He places it on the Lieberman machine. The direction of the veins actually matter. And you can see that he is placing the leaves in his hand, and it's all about the pulse. It's all about how thick the cigar feels in his hand, right? So it's not overly tight or not too loose. You can see that he's folding it, and we call this accordion style. He can fold the full leaf in about 4 folds. And this accordion style is basically creating the air channels. You can also see that he is grabbing at the bottom of the bunch and cutting, right? So right there, he cuts in the bottom and he's refilling accordingly. That way the cigar is not too strong or not too light throughout the whole smoking experience, and it's balanced out. One thing that you might look is that there's 3 tobaccos, right? But he's trying to put the strongest tobacco, the thickest tobacco in the center. The combustion of the cigar is very important, and by putting the thickest tobacco in the center, you're allowing for a good, even combustion. The thinner tobaccos go towards the outside. He puts it in the Lieberman machine and he rolls it up, catching the cigar right at the end. He adds a little vegetable glue. It's a vegetable glue, all natural. It has no color, no smell, no taste. And then with the guillotine, he cuts it to size. Once he has cut it to size, he puts it in the mold, and in that mold, once the full mold is complete, he will press it, and that mold will be pressed for about 1 hour. 30 minutes first, then he will take every single bunch that he's made, flip it 90 degrees, and then press it again for another 30 minutes. So the bunches are ready. Now they're 100% cylindrical, and he will be applying the wrapper. This is basically his partner, Nacho. He has his wrappers with a cloth that is nice and moist. That keeps the wrappers conditioned and keeps them flexible during the whole process. He's rolling multiple cigars. And Nacho will basically make the first cuts. He's using the traditional chaveta in this moment, and he will be making cuts around the outside, and then also on the
inner side of the leaf, because he's eliminating the rough edges, and then he's making a cut in the bottom that are near the center vein. So we're only using half leaves here, correct? So one leaf gives you two halves and are enough for 2 cigars. He's gonna start at the foot of the cigar and then start rolling up. Depending on the direction of the veins, he can roll either with his right hand or with his left hand.
They have to be ambidextrous because of the vein orientation.
Exactly. What's really important is that you see that how he's stretching the leaf, right? And he's stretching and then he's taking out any pronounced veins. You just saw that where he came in with the nails and he's basically making sure that no pronounced veins are left, and he's eliminating that while he's rolling the cigar. So with the chaveta, he's making cuts around, and this is what we call kind of like a flag formation. You see it here, where he has this flag coming out of the head of the cigar. He's gonna cut there in the top, and then slowly chip away at it and make this little circular flag around the head. This circle basically allows him to create a smooth, round head on the top of the cigar. He's using the same vegetable glue, and he's forming the head, making sure it's as cylindrical as possible, as round as possible. And then he rounds off the head, and then he cuts to the 5 inches, or in this case, 4 7/8. So this is one of the newest innovations, or one of the few innovations that can happen to this kind of craft. You can see also that it's no longer a wooden plate underneath, it is a metal plate.
Yeah.
So that allows for the pizza cutter and the chaveta to cut through and not have this wooden plate over time deteriorate. The metal plate has a lot more resistance. And you can create these very clean cuts with one slice. He doesn't have to go 1, 2, 3 cuts with a chaveta.
That seems a little faster as well.
Yeah, people that have moved over to the pizza cutter, normally their production increases a little bit. However, some are traditionalists and you can't move them away from the chaveta. But we find that the cuts are cleaner, it looks almost more perfect, you know, and they have a faster production. So here, how you make the flag formation with the pizza cutter, and you can see it's one clean swipe. It's not several swipes. Let's say on a good day that they're rolling 500 cigars in an 8-hour shift, they are rolling 62.5 cigars an hour. Right under a minute.
Yeah.
Right under a minute. Even after the cigar is rolled, we're going to go through several quality controls to double check that every cigar is exactly the same ring gauge. Quality control is very important. The cigar is basically checked 7 times at the moment the cigar is made. One by the buncher and then the supervisor, another one by the guy that applies the wrapper and the supervisor. Then basically every supervisor checks them in 50s, and they one by one we touch the cigars and we check for the composition of the cigar, if it's underfilled or too filled up. After that, every cigar is measured in bulks of 25 or 50, and then every cigar is also weighed in bulks of 25 or 50. And then after that, if it didn't pass that check of weight or measurement, then another supervisor goes in and checks again, one by one, to find a cigar that is faulty. Just at the moment that the cigar is made, there's 7 checks. If you have 0 rejects in one day, you get a nice boost, you get a nice incentive. And on top of that, you have to meet your quota, get 0% reject, and you have to understand that our cigar rollers are very good. You have to have worked for us at least 10 years before you can start rolling Davidoff. And that means that our rejection rate is really low. We get less than 1% rejections when the cigar is rolled. And we're doing 7 quality controls on them. So that means they're very, very skilled, and they're very, very good at what they do.
And still check it on top.
Oh yeah, I mean, we're looking for perfection.
Sure.
This is Davidoff. There's nothing less.
People make mistake, normal, make mistake. For that reason, in any process, you create controls. control. But no important how good is your control. You only have problem of quality if you not create a quality culture. You need to create a quality culture in your people. I work with only one word, loyalty. I am loyalty to my supply, maybe the small farmers or the bigger supply, he's loyal to me. I am loyal to my workers, they are loyal to the company. I am loyal to the consumer, they are loyal to our product. And that is the simple word, and that working, because I transmit that you need to work with passion. You observe some rollers, the passion of the roller. Each cigar that he produces, any roller, have a control. But there are some rollers that you don't need it to make the control, because the passion is 100%, 100%. And that is the perfect quality control. And this is a mission of our country to the rest of the world. And you are part of that mission, the mission to transmit to the world our knowledge, our passion of tobacco.
After painstaking scrutiny through Davidoff's esteemed quality controls, the cigars are left to rest. This may last 1 to 2 months so as to ensure that the humidity of the cigar's different tobaccos have all stabilized to the same level. However, one step remains before they can be packaged for distribution.
The ladies' jobs here, you can see again it's ladies, you can see again it's bright lights, black background. The ladies' job is basically to pick 25 cigars that have exactly the same color.
Each row is 25, yeah.
Oh, sometimes it's depending on the size and the ring gauge is less, but we try to make it in 25s.
Sure.
Right? And if you have 4 rows, that's 100. If you have 8 rows, that's 200. Every bulk is a little different, depending on the size of the cigar. So with this final color sorting, it's very important that when we finally put the bands and then we put the cigars inside the box, when you open up your box of Davidoff cigars, all the cigars are exactly the same color, not ranging from one shade to the other. And that's very, very important. In the past, we're talking 90s and early 2000s, we'd actually send all the darker shades to the United States and all the lighter shades to Europe.
Okay.
It was such easier on the logistics. But nowadays we are actually traveling more, us, people, consumers are traveling more. There's more social media, people are seeing cigars online, on their cell phones and their computers, and they're saying, why were they getting a different colors than we were? So now we have adapted, and now we have a color range for every single line. Color range for this line is, that's the darkest it can be, that's the lightest it can be. At that level, that's a no. And basically, that cigar, after it's gone through all the quality control, just because of color, it gets rejected. Which is insane. A cigar that smokes perfect, just because of color, gets rejected.
Wow.
Following this, an eagle-eyed worker will apply the bands to the most attractive side of the cigar with the fewest veins. Approximately 70,000 bands can be applied to their respective cigars in a single day.
What you always notice is that every Davidoff cigar has 4 things. So this is how you read a Davidoff cigar. Davidoff, the logo and script of Geneva. It's the 2000, is the signature line, the 2000. Davidoff of Geneva, signature line, the 2000 inside the signature.
So this is also known as the white label. And last night we had all 3 from the Discoveries pillar, and that was the black label. So can that also help you with the pillar it's in as well?
Yeah, so we are also color coding. So from far you can see if it's a black pillar, if it's core, if it's Winston Churchill, and then some have colors like orange is Nicaragua, red is Yamasa, gray, green, and yellows are Escurio, and basically every single line has a different color.
You told me that after the bands have been applied, they're usually given the night to rest to let the the adhesive settle, and now they're going to be cellophane. So just explain to people, like, why are we using cellophane on cigars, and can you also explain that cellophane is not a plastic product, and it's why it's natural and that's good for the cigar?
So this cellophane that she's applying, there's many reasons why we use this. But first and foremost, like you were saying, this is not plastic. This is cellulose. This is a vegetable. This is made out of a tree, vegetable, right? And it's porous, so humidity can go in and out. And what that allows is that you can leave your cigar inside a humidor, and the humidity will go in, and it will be stable. A lot of people say, oh, when I buy a cigar, I take it out of the cellophane and put it in my humidor. But I'm telling you, we are pro cellophane. Cellophane is not plastic, is environmentally friendly. Cellophane is porous, humidity can go in and out. That also means that if you leave it on the dashboard of your car under the sun, it was going to dry out, but it will preserve humidity for a couple days. If you're traveling around with a cigar that has no cellophane, the humidity is gonna leave a lot quicker. And also for transport, that's another thing. We see over 7% less rejects, broken cigars when we ship cigars with cellophane. So this protects your cigar from breaking, which would be a shame if it breaks after all this work.
All the steps from farm to all the way to this point for the final hurdle.
There's two more reasons. We like how cellophane concentrates the aromas inside the cigar. Have you ever seen a cellophane that's yellow?
Yep, I've seen it yellow.
Those are old cigars that have been inside a cellophane for many years, and that's the concentration of the aroma still locked inside there.
Sure.
So it preserves the aromas of the cigar for longer periods of time before it going flat, or also intermingling with other aromas around. Inside of your humidor, aroma transfer can happen into other cigars that are touching. This protects you from that.
So Klaus, it looks like we've pretty much reached the end of the journey here at the factory. We've got one of my favorite cigars behind us, which is the Davidoff Churchill Late Hour. This is in the Robusto format, so the woman behind us is boxing it up. So once it's been finally boxed, what happens to it then? I know how are the cigars shipped out to retailers or distribution centers? Could you mention that a little bit?
So Davidoff has 3 distribution centers. There's one in Florida that basically distributes to the United States and Canada. There's one in Germany that distributes to Europe, and there's one in Switzerland that actually distributes to the rest of the world. Okay. At that moment, we have this box. We can basically ship it, and then in the next month, every cigar gets shipped out every month to different distribution centers. And in the shipment, in the container, we actually freeze the cigar. We bring slowly the temperature to -4 degrees Celsius. We basically make sure that there's no contamination, no bugs.
So the -4 degrees C will kill off any potential.
Yeah, even kills the eggs of the bugs, just in case.
Sure.
So at that temperature, then it slowly defrosts after hitting that temperature. And once it gets to the distribution center, it takes about a week for it to finally defrost slowly, and then we can put it into a giant humidor that basically is going to be ready for shipment. And once it reaches the correct humidity, then it can be shipped to your store. Basically, once it lives here, in the next 4 or 5 months, it has a possibility of already reaching your store.
Okay, and then you can buy these cigars and ultimately enjoy them. So.
And you have to notice that at this point, we have worked on these cigars for about 5 years on the tobacco itself. We've had over 300 hands touch each one of the leaves. We've had about 170 steps. We have had
200 quality control steps.
We have about 1,500 people working every day here in the Dominican Republic, making sure that your cigar is as perfect as possible. So,
I mean, even on this tour, we saw some tobacco being sorted that was 13 years old.
Yeah.
So it could be even more than 5 years.
Yeah, so 5 years is the average.
5 years the average, yeah. So
4 or 5 years, no less than that.
Well, Klaus, it's been an absolute pleasure. I know Charles-Philippe and I really appreciated a couple of days we spent with you here at the Davidoff Farms warehouse and factory. We really hope that you've enjoyed this video and seen behind the scenes of how your premium cigars are made. Like this video if you've liked it. Also subscribe to our channel and add any comments below. Within the section, we're also going to have links to many other videos from this particular journey we've had in the Dominican Republic, so please feel free to check those out. Once again, thanks very much, Klaas. It's been an absolute pleasure and an honor. Thanks for your time. Most importantly, patience and expertise.
My pleasure.
With all of that being said, my name's Paul Anthony.
I'm Klaas Kelner.
And I'll see you next time.
Take care.